Okay, so this is fun. I've been obviously cooped up in my house since March, and been working on some new stuff. So I'm excited to maybe talk about some of the new stuff that I'm working on lately. I'm assuming most people know of my work, so I won't bore everyone to death. Obviously, my name is Joshua Davis. I have a website that I never update, joshuadavis.com. I think 2018 was the last time I ever updated anything on that site. And that's mostly because I'm mostly updating really on 2 platforms right now, soon to be 3. And obviously Instagram being kind of the main one, and then Patreon, where I'm teaching creative coding to other like-minded individuals that want to learn how to do things with code. If you don't know my Instagram, it's PrayStation, so Instagram.com PrayStation. And again, this is probably where I'm posting the most. And I would say probably 90% of the work that I get is actually through Instagram. And the reason for that, I believe, is because it's just short pieces of content. So I've kind of gotten into a habit where I kind of do 1 of 2 things, which is I kind of post daily stuff. I try to post daily stuff on my story that kind of shows the behind the scenes of maybe some sketches or things that I'm working on. Knowing full well that they're going to delete after 24 hours. So they're not things that I really want to keep around. They're just kind of like a little window into the secret dark wizard magic that I do. And if something is kind of more in a finalized status, then I'm posting that as like an actual post. And then that content, obviously is only a minute long. What's nice about obviously using Instagram as a means to get clients is that they're not seeing some like 6-minute or 8-minute video. They're only seeing kind of like snippets of ideas. And I think just showing those kind of snippets of ideas allows potential collaborators or clients to say, hey, maybe we can work together on something. So I'm mostly posting on Instagram. Again, I'm also posting on Patreon, where I'm, teaching creative coding, and we can talk about that a little bit later. And then the third thing that's just kind of happening right now that I hope we can talk about a lot, or you have questions about a lot, is crypto art. So I'm using a platform like Super Rare, and Super Rare lets me kind of post some of this new kind of blockchain related artwork. So obviously that's a little bit about myself. I would say maybe just like a little story in the beginning, just to kind of like paint a picture. I did not start in digital art. Like I didn't go to school for computer science. I was the kid who went to summer school all 4 years for math because I failed it. I am not good at math. Me and math are not friends, or we're not friends. I was too busy skateboarding and doing that kind of stuff. But I was involved in art. And so I kind of did art all throughout high school. And just to kind of show you, these are some of the last paintings I ever did. But I was like a classical painter. I worked in oil paint. I kind of made my own pigments. This is on paper. And I was just like a traditional painter. And I ended up taking like 2nd place in the state of Colorado for painting out of high school. And that was my desire to move to New York, where I now live, was to try to become an artist. Some other fun bits. I grew up in Littleton, Colorado. And when I say high school, I mean Columbine High School. And when I say Columbine High School, you mean the Columbine High School? And I say, yes, the Columbine High School. That was my high school. I lived about 2 blocks from Columbine. My brother was in the lunchroom. when those two kids came in, but that's a totally other story. But that's where I actually went to high school. And again, painter, traditional painter. I was not a computer science guy at all. Graduated 90, moved to New York in 92, and thought just like this is where you come to, you know, become a painter or an artist. The story is going to get even stranger, but I somehow started working for Michael Alec, who was, if you've seen the movie Party Monster, he was my boss. I worked at a couple of nightclubs in New York City called the Limelight and Tunnel, and I used to make costumes. I was a club kid. My cocaine dealer was the guy that Michael Alec killed and chopped up. Like, somebody's got to make a movie about my life because it's batshit crazy. But anyway, if you go onto Michael Alec's Wikipedia, I'm actually listed there as one of his club kids. And I don't know if you guys saw, but on Twitter, I don't know if I can move it over here, but on Twitter, I posted a picture of like what I used to, like the stuff that I used to make and go out in. But anyway, so it took me a couple of years to, you know, get back on the art track. I ended up having, you know, that experience with Michael Alec, and that was kind of the catalyst for me to get sober. So January 7th, 1995, I got sober. So I stopped using drugs and alcohol. And then I was actually able to make artwork. That was kind of like my new birthday, was January 7th, 1995. And from there, I decided to go to Pratt. I just thought, you know, I'm an artist, and now I've cleaned up, I've gotten sober. You know, let me go to art school. So I applied to a school in Brooklyn called Pratt. And what happened was Pratt said, you know, listen, you're like a starving artist. You know, you need help. You know, paying your rent and that kind of stuff. You know, do you know how to make websites? And this was, you know, 1995. And I was like, yes, I absolutely know how to make websites. I had no idea how to make websites, but I had read a book. I went out and got a book. It was writing HTML and JavaScript for Netscape 2. And built my first website like 95, 96. And that was kind of like, and my accidental falling into using computers. And I guess maybe it was like around 1996 or so, where I just kind of had this epiphany where I was just like, no, I'm an artist, I'm a painter, I'm still a painter, but instead of using paint and brushes, I'm actually going to use computers and, you know, now programming. You know, again, I started very simple using HTML. HTML obviously evolved into JavaScript. JavaScript evolved into CSS. That evolved into Flash. I ended up using Flash for about 15 years. And then there was kind of this moment where I just wanted to do things different. And this was like before Steve Jobs wrote that letter about, you know, the death of Flash. I wanted to work with things like Arduino and cameras and connects and lasers, and Flash was never going to help me do that. So I kind of jumped ship like about a month before Steve Jobs like officially wrote that death to Flash love letter, and started working in an environment called processing. And so now for the most part, I spend most of my time working in processing and GLSL. I saw Ben Fox here in the group. He's a guy that I've collaborated with quite a bit on learning GLSL and playing with GLSL. So he'll be an interesting guy to ping later on. And then using things like Notch. Now I've kind of used this quarantine to evolve into programs like Notch. Also Unreal. I would love to talk to Tim about using Unreal. We can kind of talk about some hot new things that are happening in that environment. And the rest is history. So now I'm mostly focusing on audio reactive graphics. It's kind of the code base that I've been working on now for the past year, and applying this strictly to crypto NFTs. So hopefully that's kind of like a background of stuff that I'm sure maybe you've already heard or whatnot. But I defer to Tim now. Like maybe we just, what do we do? Do we start chatting or?
We could. So I passed you, host, if you want to like screen share any of your like stuff you've been working on. I don't know if you, or if that's top secret.
Yeah. And hey, Mark, you might want to mute your microphone because I can hear you breathing and sipping, which I can only assume is scotch. Mark G.
Yeah, so typically kind of what we do is we talk about what you're interested in, what you want to share. And if people have questions, just write them in the chat. And then we'll just kind of pick the ones that look the most interesting and take it from there.
Cool. Is it sharing my screen or do you not see it?
It is, yeah.
Oh, okay. But I don't see it. So it's black for me, but you guys see it. Cool. Okay. So this is kind of the code base that so here's the funny thing. Quarantine happened, and like right before quarantine, I was working as technical director at a place called Zero Space, which is like a event space across from Madison Square Garden here in New York City. And in there, we've got, lasers and lights and sculptures, a bunch of people, artists that were artists at Burning Man, stuff like that. When quarantine happened, the restrictions in New York City meant that we could really no longer be open to the public. And so, that ended up closing doors for the time being until we can open again, about March. And about March, I noticed that one of two things was going to happen. And the first was I was seeing everybody installing Animal Crossing. So I knew I was either going to install Animal Crossing and then the rest 9 months I was going to be totally screwed, or I could try to, learn some new stuff or use this time to try to try some new things and whatnot. So one was sort of like motivation and one was procrastination. And it was a real struggle because I really wanted to install Animal Crossing, but I did not. And so what I ended up doing is playing around in an environment called Notch. And if you don't know Notch, the URL I think is notch.one. If I'm not mistaken. Let me just move this over to here. And then I think you just go notch.one. It might help if we spell it right. Josh Davis. So this is Notch. Notch is, I guess the best way that I could explain it is Notch is Touch Designer meets Cinema 4D meets After Effects, right? So it's a real-time node-based patch environment. So, you drag out nodes that perform certain functions just like Touch Designer would, but you have ray tracing and ambient occlusion. So you kind of got all the prettiness of Cinema 4D, but you kind of have the interactivity of Touch Designer, and then it's got a whole timeline-based thing that's kind of like After Effects, right? And so I really spent this time in March or so just kind of learning this program. And the nice thing about learning this program is that the free trial never expires. So you can download the free trial, you can build anything that you absolutely want. The only catch is you can't save. So you basically you wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to learn how to do something. And then you kind of spend time making that thing. And then you just know at the end of the day, when you close down your computer, you've lost everything you've done. But it was like a really great opportunity for me in the very, very beginning to see like, hey, can I try this thing out? And is it something that I'm interested in? And so I did that for a little while and decided that it was something that I was interested in. And then I ended up buying the dongle, and it's pricey. It's not cheap, but it's a really amazing environment for making things. And so on my Instagram page, I kind of posted a couple of examples from this. These were some of them where, again, you can patch all this stuff out, make it really interactive. In this case, it's listening to music in order to play. But I was able to get things like glass and metal and reflections that you normally that I could normally never do inside of processing. And then now that I have this up, I could probably go to my Twitter page, because here's that. I just got to show this picture, because this is right before I got sober. It's pretty funny. There, so very beautiful. I'm a beautiful boy. So I used to sort of like make these costumes as a way to kind of express myself. And I used to, get paid to freak people out in nightclubs. That was kind of my job for a little while before I got sober. So now I've been working on this code base called Void, and it's what I'm using right now to do crypto NFTs. It is a completely audio reactive environment. So it means I get to collaborate with other sound designers and musicians to kind of produce these reactive pieces. And so the nice bit is that the base of this is processing, but it's also using GLSL in a way where I'm able to stack it. So for example, I could reset the animation. And so here I just have like a base animation, but then I might be able to say something like, well, okay, I want it to like, paint and leave a little trail of itself. Or I might want to say, oh, I want to have this GLSL that sort of moves the red, green, blue channels, or I can turn that off. Or, maybe I want to kind of apply some sort of mesh, noise wave to it. Or maybe I want to turn that off. Maybe I want to turn off the background and I want to color it in a certain way. So right now, this code base has kind of like 36 animations, but each of these 36 animations can have a lot of different effects applied to them. So I might say, okay, well, I want the background back on, but I don't want it to color the artwork. I want it to clear, and I want it to do the red, green, blue stuff, but maybe I want to apply like a halftone shader. So I can sort of have like 3 different halftone shaders on this. And I might say, well, okay, but maybe I want a kaleidoscope, and I want it to have 4 reflections or 3 reflections or 40 reflections. So it's an interesting way of sort of applying effects in real time. And because I've moved over to a PC and I'm using, basically gaming GPUs, all of this can happen pretty much 40 to 60 frames a second. And then what I can do is then start to toggle through the different kind of animations. So here I'm just pressing the space bar to sort of toggle through the kind of different environments that I have in this code. So right now, I think if I've done the math right, just this one code base can produce, I think, 3,600 different unique animations. So it's been really fun to basically use this with audio. So obviously I can't really demo it with audio right now because I've got my headphones on and we're obviously chatting, but everything is audio reactive, where I may tie a certain aspect of the animation to some kind of movement and get some kind of one-to-one direct response between what you're seeing on screen and what you're hearing sonically. So obviously I'm gonna stop sharing right now.
Cool. Yeah, we got some questions for you.
Oh shit. Okay.
All right. So here we go. Mimi asks, would love to hear more about the rare art market.
I think she meant super rare.
Yeah.
Yeah, super rare.
Gotcha. So, okay.
Jumping straight into it.
Yeah.
I know, right?
This is probably going to be a very strange conversation. Maybe I should share my screen again because it'll be helpful. How do I know? Is it sharing the screen with the visuals on it?
Yes.
It is, yeah.
I can't tell. Okay. So NFTs, crypto art, is happening. It's been happening now for about 3 years, but obviously it's starting to get a lot of traction. Probably the biggest, most visible thing that everyone has seen was Beeple, who over the course of 3 days, I think made $3.4 million selling crypto art. And the best way to maybe have this conversation is to kind of talk about like what exists now. And that's, if I'm an artist and I make this painting, the typical thing would be that, I hang it on a wall in a gallery, and the gallerist is the person who represents you, and collectors come in, and collectors say, I want to own that piece of artwork, and how much is it? And they say, okay, well, it's $1,000, and you pay $1,000, and then you physically get that piece of artwork. Okay. Now let's think about this on another level. Imagine you own the Mona Lisa. So let's just say, for example, you visit and you see the Mona Lisa and you're like, holy shit, I want to buy that. And cool, it's $1,000. And so you pay $1,000 and you own the Mona Lisa. And then time progresses and the Mona Lisa becomes very famous. And the Louvre says, we want to display the Mona Lisa in our museum. And what would happen is that the Mona Lisa gets installed in the museum. And then down below it says, this is the fucking Mona Lisa. And it's owned by Josh Davis, but it's on display at the Louvre. And many people go in with their cameras or their phones, and they sneak a picture. And so, people have pictures of the Mona Lisa, and you can buy the postcard in the gift shop. So people can buy postcards of the Mona Lisa, but the actual artwork itself is, the original thing, and somebody actually owns it, right? Somebody's actually purchased that piece of artwork. And so for a long time, we have had this idea of, well, I'm not a traditional artist. I'm a digital artist. I use Photoshop or Illustrator or programming or whatever tool that you use, right? And so let's say that I make an image, and here it is. And we've had this real struggle with how do you be an artist using digital tools in sort of the modern digital age? And you're making this in Photoshop or Illustrator, and then what do? I make this in Photoshop or Illustrator, and then like I print it out, and then that printout hangs in a gallery, and then somebody buys that printout, or maybe somebody doesn't buy the printout because they're too afraid that you're just going to open up Photoshop and print it again, right? So the art world has been a million miles away for people like myself or people on this chat. So how do we do it? So what we have now is NFTs, and they're non-fungible tokens. That's what it stands for. And the interesting thing is that we have Bitcoin, for example. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. The problem with Bitcoin is that it's just a currency. So it's very similar to a dollar or a quarter or whatever. The sort of exciting cryptocurrency that's, I think is really going to change things is Ethereum. And Ethereum is a cryptocurrency that has a contract associated with it, a smart contract. So what does that mean? Well, let's say you want to, and this is such a long drawn out answer to this question, but I want everybody to understand what is happening. When you buy a car, you can't just walk into a car dealership, put down $10,000 and say, give me that car. And the person go, okay, here are the keys. It doesn't work that way. You walk into a car dealership, you put down $10,000 and the person says, okay, let us, strike up a contract. So we make a contract that says, Volkswagen of Long Island is going to sell Josh Davis this Tiguan for $10,000 on this date and blah, blah, blah. So there's a contract that's associated with the purchase that you make. Ethereum does this. Ethereum is a cryptocurrency that also has a contract associated with it. So what you're seeing is, and again, right now, I'm just using Super Rare. So there are a lot of different marketplaces for digital artists. Super Rare is one. There's another one called Nifty Gateway is another one. There's also one called Known Origin is another one. And what these allow you to do is say, I'm going to make something, whether it be a still image, whether it be a video. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tokenize this piece of artwork. So I'm going to take this movie or I'm going to take this image and I'm basically going to put it on the blockchain. And so I put it on the Ethereum blockchain and I say, okay, I have made this piece of artwork and I own it because I created it. So if we look at Gmonk, for example, like a lot of you probably know Gmonk. Gmonk just posted one today. So it's called the Emergent Form. So if you come here, you're getting this video and you notice it says that the artist is Gmonk and it says that the owner is Gmonk. So Gmonk has made this video. He has put it on the Ethereum blockchain and said, I have made this piece of art. This is what the art looks like. I am the artist that made it. And it's also available for purchase. And if someone purchases it, they can make offers. So they can say, so it's very much like a gallery, but instead of walking into a physical space, you're going to this website. So I could say that I want to make an offer and he can either accept my offer or decline it. He could put a reserve price. He could say, I'll only sell this for $5,000. Or he could say, I want to do an auction. So there's a 24-hour auction and whoever bids on it, whoever ends up with the highest price wins the piece of artwork. And so what happens is that once that's on the Ethereum blockchain and you tokenize that artwork, you've made the Mona Lisa and someone has the option to buy it. So you could say, okay, cool, I've made this piece of artwork. This is the date that it was created. This person purchased it for $5,000. Tim is now the owner of this artwork, right? And so a lot of people have said, well, yeah, what's stopping people from, like posting this on Instagram or posting this on Twitter? It's just an MP4 file. Well, you would actually want that. In order for the art to become more popular, people need to see it. So if you own the Mona Lisa, fuck yeah, you want it hanging in a museum. You want people to take pictures of it. You want people to share it. Because then when they go back, they see, oh, okay, this is the Emergent Form. It was made by Gmonk. Yes, I love this. Oh, it's owned by Tim. That Tim guy actually bought this as part of his collection, right? And so you can actually see who was the patron of this art, who bought it, and who actually owns it. Now, the second part where it actually gets really interesting is I watched this documentary on Andy Warhol where he sold one of these Brillo boxes for $250. And this family bought it for $250. They put it on a plexiglass case. It sat in like their living room for years and years and years. This little girl who's the daughter of the father who bought it, had these fond memories of just seeing this Brillo box in their living room. And through a series of events, he ends up selling the Brillo box and it changes hands and it changes hands and it changes hands and it changes hands. And you can probably see where this is going. the documentary ends where at the very end, this Brillo box sells for $3.5 million at Sotheby's. But the question is, how much did Andy Warhol make? He made $250. The fascinating thing about using the blockchain to actually tokenize artwork and sell artwork is that if I were to buy this piece and Gmonk becomes more popular and more popular, and here, I'll give you a perfect example. Watch this. So I'm going to go to my profile, and here's a piece that I put up about 21 days ago. It's called the Void 19003. And this guy, Mike Gee, bought it. Okay. And so if you actually click this, here's the animation. Of course, you could play the audio. You can make it full screen, so on and so forth. But if you look right here, that's Scott Belsky, the guy who founded Behance. He jumped on and said, Mike, I actually want to buy this off of you. I know you bought it first, but I want to buy it off of you for 1.3 Ether, which is around $1,700. Now it ends up that Mike told Scott, no thanks, I think I'm going to hang on to this for a little while, because Mike knows that I'm going to be producing more artwork. I've got some more collaborations coming up. I have one coming up with Zola Jesus. I have one coming up with another Canadian that wears a mouse head. So he's going to hang on to this piece of art, but he could have sold it to Scott. Now, the nice bit is that if he had sold this to Scott, I actually get 10% of the sales. So even if this artwork changes hands over and over and over again, I'll always get 10% from the sales in perpetuity. So, you know, if Warhol had this kind of dynamic, if he were still alive, if he had this kind of dynamic in the art world, when his thing sold at Sotheby's for, you know, 3.5 million or whatever it was, he actually would have gotten 10% of that. So right now the art world is kind of getting shooken up by what's happening in crypto art, and I hope that was long, but I really hope it talked about what's kind of happening in that space, because it's super exciting for people like us, because now we have a way to attach value to the digital art. We have a gallery to present it. We have a means of selling it. And then if we sell it, you know, we can say, Tim owns this piece, and this is the value that it has. Now, the funny story is that cryptocurrency obviously has been going through a roller coaster right now. I actually got into cryptocurrency about 4 years ago. As a total nerd, I built an Ethereum miner. I was mining Ethereum here in my art studio. And it was great in the winter because this computer generated so much heat that it kept me warm in the winter. But the funny thing is that I know someone who sold a piece for $20,000. And because Ethereum was sort of going through a roller coaster, he just kept it as cryptocurrency. And that 20,000 is now 32,000. So it's a way to put your artwork on the blockchain, sell it, and also because you're getting paid in cryptocurrency, you have a way to think of it as an investment, right? Now, crypto could tank and it could go down, but that's kind of the risk that you take, or you could move it over into regular cash. It's completely up to you. So if you have not looked at what's happening in the crypto art NFT space, have fun going down that rabbit hole. It's a really amazing thing that's happening right now. That was a long answer, Tim.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. This topic has come up a few times, so I'm glad that we have someone that can give us a long answer like that. That's perfect. Because yeah, I think the things that have been missing with digital art is like the scarcity and value portion, like you were saying. You know, someone being able to add a digital piece to a collection, and then also you know, managing that, like, well, it's just a digital file, this ephemeral thing that we can reproduce infinitely. Like, how do we negotiate the difference between that and, like, you know, traditional art markets? So yeah.
And then, you know, like I'm doing some things where, you know, I may, you know, for example, this piece, you know, I've got kind of an interesting angle, which is, hey, I'm going to make this, you know, animation that, you know, reacts to audio. And, you know, not only you're getting a custom piece of audio, you're getting a custom piece of artwork. But then I say here in the description, listen, you know, not only did I make this video, but you're going to get high res versions of the video. So, you know, there's 4K versions of the video. So I give you a zip file where, you know, if you want to put it on your TV or a picture frame, you know, you actually own a high def version of this animation. But then I've also, you know, ran this program, you know, 1,000,000 times and found 11 images that I sort of deemed beautiful, and 11 because Spinal Tap. I'm hilarious. I don't know what to tell you. So you get 11 images, and then out of those like 11 gems, if you are the owner, you can pick one, and I'll print it out and actually give you, you know, a physical piece of art. So, you know, I'm doing a thing where, you know, I still want people to hang something on their wall, you know, so I'm kind of in a unique position where I'm saying, hey, I've got a wide format printer right here. I can tokenize this animation, render some stills, and actually, you know, give you a physical print as well. So it, you know, I'm doing something a little bit different because I'm old and I want people to have also physical art on their wall. But really what people are paying for is, you know, the tokenized animation here. I just offer up some other goodies.
So we got a few questions in chat, but specifically on this,
yeah,
is there any way to include source code when you do that?
Yeah. So, you know, perfect example, Tim, you know, because I'm doing this in processing, there's nothing really stopping me from taking the program and actually generating an executable out of it. You know, my code can run real time just using the microphone. So, you know, when I compile, you know, you could potentially look at the Java file and actually see, you know, the code that generated this artwork. That's totally possible. I know that Joni Lemercier, he is building code specifically that runs in the browser, and he hasn't done it yet. Like if you look at his stuff that's on here, eventually he's going to be tokenizing web-based stuff. So you would actually see the code and be able to run it in the browser. So yeah, there's a lot of different options for the type of content that you could tokenize.
Yeah, I saw him speak at MUTEC last year. He had some interesting ideas surrounding using web-based formats for doing installations, just to make things easier to update remotely and stuff. Is some really cool stuff he's doing.
Yeah, and right now, like on Super Rare, he's got these two pieces, and yeah, this one he sold for $10,000, wow. Called Motif 687 Cubes. There's a lot of really, and listen, I know what some people are going to say, like, holy shit, are people really spending that kind of money? You know, if you look at this piece, this guy right here, illustrator, is Tim Kang. He's the one that kind of rocked when he bought Beeple's piece for $777,777. It's like, so he spent almost $1 million on one piece of artwork. I mean, just shy of it. So there's a lot of people who got a lot of money in crypto and don't have anything to do with it. And I'm about making artwork. And, you know, if I can figure out a way, and this maybe ties in some of the questions that you had posted a little bit earlier, Tim, is, you know, I've been in kind of the weird position where, you know, I've had to take on like maybe 3 corporate projects a year just so that I can pay my mortgage, you know. So maybe I do a collaboration with Pepsi and the Super Bowl, or Pepsi and the Champions League, you know, and that kind of project is, you know, spans a couple of months. I'm making something for a couple of days, and then that's like, then I get paid, and I'm like, okay, cool. You know, I don't have to do anything for 6 months, you know, like it's like figure out what the next job is, you know. And I think that's the other thing that maybe a lot of guys like me don't talk about. I do not make a lot of money. I think a lot of people have this misconception that like, if you're popular and you have a lot of followers and, you know, you're speaking at conferences, like you make more money than, you know, you're a millionaire, you know. And the truth of the matter is I had this discussion with Stefan Sagmeister one time where, you know, I think I had like $6,000 in my account, and I was like, you know, in some conference, like, you know, overlooking like 3,000 people, and people are wearing like Gucci shoes and Louis Vuitton shoes, and I'm in Crocs, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm up on stage, and like, there's definitely people in the audience that like make more money than I do. And so I said to Stefan, I was like, how do you do it? Like, how do you make money? He's like, no, you know, those people do make more money than you, and they probably should, because they probably hate the work they're making. He's like, you know, you get to make whatever the hell you want, and you're not going to make as much money, but you'll probably be a lot happier. And so, you know, I only had to do like 3 projects a year, 3 corporate projects a year, just to kind of sustain, like, okay, you know, this is enough money for me to, you know, pay my mortgage and buy food. And so this kind of crypto art scene is like really fascinating, because, you know, these are patrons of the arts. Like, you know, can I get people who have huge crypto wallets to say, you know, Tim, Hugh, Ben, Brian, Alyssa, Mimi, I like the artwork you're making. I like that art you're making. Here's $10,000. I want to own that piece. Fuck, make more of it. And so, I think that's brilliant. And it's something that really has never existed for our kind of digital arts community.
Yeah, for sure. I get that story actually kind of segues fairly well into some of the other topics. We've got kind of questions in all directions here, but just that story I think is really interesting in terms of the topic of, like, you know, doing work that you care about. I think that you kind of mentioned that, you know, there is sort of a trap of, like, you know, doing the work that you have to do to be able to pay the bills, and then there's kind of like the work that you want to do is off to the side. I mean, maybe this is just outsider perspective. It seems like you've got a pretty good balance. So I'm curious what, like, obviously the crypto thing completely changes what that balance looked like, but I'd be curious what that balance might look like for you before the crypto thing.
Yeah. So, you know, the interesting thing is that I put in my time at a studio, you know, like way back when I worked at a design studio. It was called IO360. It was 16 of us. And at IO360 was Coy Vin, who's now like at the New York Times, I think. Casey Reese. Casey was actually a designer there, and I was his technologist. So it's kind of a weird flip, because I remember when Casey came up to me, he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to take, you know, programming classes, continuing education classes at NYU. And I was like, okay, yeah, you do that. And then like a couple of months later, he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to go to Boston to MIT to study under John Maeda. I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And then what's even more funny is now it's come full circle, and now I program in the environment that him and Ben Fry created, which is totally blows my mind. So I worked at a studio, and I guess, you know, maybe because I worked at a studio and did kind of like the normal graphic design grind, meant that I could go home at night and kind of work on whatever just made me happy or interested. And so, you know, at that time, I'm working on Prey Station, I'm working on Once Upon a Forest, where, you know, these were just like projects that I was just trying to express myself artistically with color and form and texture and interactivity, because I didn't have to worry about money. because I had the studio job. And then what happened is that I think I got an email. I think my first client was Volkswagen, and I was asked to build the microsite for the Volkswagen Phaeton, and the budget was $50,000. And this was while I was at a second studio. So I moved from IO360 to Kyokan. And I'm at Kyokan and I get offered this job at Volkswagen. I was like, wow, $50,000. I was like, holy shit. I think at the time at Kyokan, my salary was like 130,000. And this was like before the dot-com bubble. So don't judge. Everyone was shitting out money. I think my salary was like 130,000. And Volkswagen comes along and says, hey, we want this microsite and it's for 50 grand. And I thought, that's all some people make in an entire year. And I just took the leap of faith. I said, you know what? I'm going to continue to work on these projects, PlayStation and Once Upon a Forest. And I'm going to take this Volkswagen job and I'm going to get paid $50,000. And then I'm just going to try to make it a year. Because that's what some people make in a year. And that's what I did. So I left studio life then and kind of been solo ever since. And what I found is that when I was expressing myself and doing weird things, there'd be clients. I'd find people who were like, yeah, that's really unique. When you don't have to worry about clients or do client work and you're just making art for yourself, you're at your most uniqueness. And so you're sort of presenting like, hey, I'm this weirdo and look at this weird shit that I'm making. And then somebody's like, I love that weird shit. I love that weird shit you're making. Can you make some of that weird shit for us? And it'd be like, yes, I can make that weird shit for you. And so that's just how it works is that, if you take the time to use social media or to use the web to sort of promote the things that you're interested in, people are going to hire you to do you. Now, are you going to make $10 million? Probably not. I only have to do like 3 projects a year. And what I found is that I could continue to work on these strange things that I was interested in. I could continue to put them on Instagram, and like-minded people would sort of find that stuff and say, hey, can you do this? I think last year I did an ad campaign for Intel where they wanted to have some generative animations for an airport, and that kind of client relationship and that kind of budget meant like, cool, that's one of my 3 clients. And so, I'm only sort of doing, a couple of projects over the years. I'm only making like a certain amount of money, but it's enough for me to pay, all my bills so that I can keep spending, each month making the weird shit that I'm interested in. So, I've shared this slide lecturing before, which is, the type of work you make is the type of work you'll get hired to do. And I think if you look at guys like me and G-Monk and Beeple and all these other people, that's just what they're doing. They're just being themselves. And trust me, like if you know David O'Reilly and you've seen David O'Reilly's work and how weird his stuff is, and that guy is still making a living, you're going to be just fine. Just fine. You're muted, Tim.
Yeah, I'm just reading. We got a couple of long questions here, but yeah, I think
I'll try to be quicker. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. This is great. All super insightful, I think. Yeah, so I think that idea of doing the work that you want to get hired for is pretty important. I have also experienced that a lot. It's like, now having done the 2 years of dailies, I will get approached a lot more for the things that I made in those dailies than for anything else.
Yeah,
just because it already exists. So that's definitely true. So it's kind of weird because I think being an artist is probably the only profession where you have to do the work first and then get a client for it. It's a little bit backwards, but yeah.
And the funny thing too that you'll find, and I'm sure you can attest to this, is clients' only frame of reference is the stuff that you posted. So they'll be looking at something you did like 2 months ago, and they'll be like, "Hey, can we have that? Can we have that? But can you put a Pepsi logo on it?" So it then becomes really interesting. And again, following your work for as long as I have, Tim, you can probably say the same thing, which is when you're constantly putting out this work on dailies, you're creating a toolkit of tools that you can then apply to this client work. I don't know how many times I've had people go, okay, I want, that thing that you posted on January 1st mixed with this thing that you did on February 3rd. So in a lot of ways, like the sort of fun time, the play time becomes kind of the research and development for what, clients don't know that they want, right? And so you're kind of in this position where you're sort of always innovating because you're sort of creating the things that haven't happened for them yet. And, it just works.
That's something that I was taught as well by, I did some like music production courses with an artist called Il Gates. And one of the things that he talked about that I have applied to basically all of my creative practice is that like creative time and technical time should be completely separate. So you kind of build the tools that you're going to use when you're being creative in a separate time. And that stuff can happen when you like say you only have like an hour. You could probably bang out like a tutorial for adding something new, maybe getting something basic working in a language. So then the next time you have a solid block of like 4 hours, then you have a thing made to play with. And you're not kind of like bouncing back and forth between trying to like, be creative and like, reading documentation.
And I think that's kind of the interesting thing. I mean, I don't know how many people here in the group do creative coding, but I mean, this is what drew me to creative coding was that idea of like, Photoshop, Illustrator, Cinema 4D, you're sort of boxed into their sandbox. And so you're competing with a million other people trying to figure out how to be creative with the same exact tools as everybody else. And so, when I first got into, creative coding, I was just like, well, I want to make my own tools. And a lot of that, I mean, I don't know how long people have been doing this on this call, but, for me, it was this thing called Auto Illustrator. And the guy who did it is the guy who also did Hector, the spray can servo motor thing. Anyway, yeah, you're Glenny, exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Ben. So he had a project called Auto Illustrator, which was like, it only worked in a certain version of Illustrator. And it was like a panel, like there was one called Ants. And you would just hit ants and it would put all these ants on the screen and they would be drawing vector trails. And then your cursor would turn into a hammer and you'd have to hammer the ants in order to stop and kill them. And this was in Illustrator. This was like an add-on thing in Illustrator. And I just thought like, that's genius. Like that project was exactly like, I want to make my own tools so that like when I'm making work that people see, they go, well, what, how did, how the fuck did you make that? Oh, well, it's code. Well, what do you mean it's code? If I was able to use programming, I could really start to sort of carve out a style that would be very hard to replicate because I'm not using the standard tools that everybody's kind of boxed into.
And that kind of brings up a good point I was thinking about, which is how much of a role the tool itself plays in the art. Because it's not just, I mean, as a painter, no one really invests in the paint, and the brushes that you collect. It's really what you put on the canvas. But with generative code, I'm curious about your thoughts about how much that source code and what like the recipe plays into that final art that someone's actually purchasing on the blockchain.
Yeah. I don't know if I necessarily agree, Darren, because I think, if you want to make trees, you have to buy a very specific brush for making, leaves on a tree. So, you know, in a lot of ways, when I'm working on code, I am designing the brushes, and I'm even designing how the paint, you know, flows onto the piece. So in a lot of ways, a lot of the structure that I'm building is, okay, cool, this is how the paint is going to flow. This is a brush, and this is okay, but this brush is like 2-dimensional, or maybe this brush is 3-dimensional. You know, so in a lot of ways, I am designing the paint and the brush. And then comes the other part where that's okay, now that I have these brushes and I have these paints, you know, what is sort of the pattern maker? How am I making patterns? How am I making those patterns, but then using animation to sort of maybe oscillate them in a certain way? And, you know, a lot of that's very similar to, you know, I'm sure everybody here has seen these, you know, YouTube videos where they put a speaker and they put a bunch of rice or sand on the top of the speaker, and then they turn up the volume and it like makes a pattern. Like that concept is exactly how I think I go about making art, which is, you know, I got to get the speaker, I got to paint the sand, you know, but then there's kind of this other component that sort of, you know, is this sort of algorithmic pattern maker that says, okay, I'm going to do this thing that has a certain pattern to it. So in a lot of ways, I respectfully disagree, because I am sort of doing what you said I'm not doing.
No, I think maybe my comment wasn't clear. I was saying that is exactly what you're doing. You're building
okay.
you are
cool.
building the generative tool set
Totally.
to create the art. That all is the art. There is no separation between the tool and the output. That's exactly my point. So
we agree. I don't know what
definitely.
I'm talking about.
No worries, Josh. But that was still a good answer, because it's a good defense that some people might not see generative art in the same category as what some people would call classical art. I think the trick is to show them that it's much more than traditional in some ways.
And I think, you know, the funny thing, the reason why I think I love this so much is, and again, you know, some of my friends that are on here can respond to this, which is I'm always surprised. So every time I make a project, it's almost like my birthday, because I don't know what the fuck is going to happen. Like I'm going to throw a bunch of code together, and I'm going to sort of, you know, tool it in such a way, and then I sort of sit back and it's like, okay, and it's like winning the lotto. All of a sudden it's like, hey, look at this, and like, holy shit, like, you know, well, never thought that was going to happen. You know, so I think that's also why I sort of stay in this practice is, hi, baby. Hi, Amy's baby. I will curse less. But I think that's what
Josh,
draws. Yes.
I love your cursing so much. I always would show your videos to my high school coding classes, and I'd be like, okay, now, shh, don't tell anybody. There's like, fuck, shh. Be cool when the principal walks in, okay? Be cool.
Let me tell you a funny story. So I get invited to speak at TED in 2005. And so they fly me out to TED, and my group was called Organic. And because I was, you know, doing certain organic, you know, equations and making art with that. And if you know anything about TED, it's, you know, your talk is 15 minutes. And so I was so nervous, you know, like Matt Groening is in this, you know, there's Ron Howard, you know, there was like all these celebrities. It was kind of like my first kind of celebrity. I was so nervous that I probably said the most fucks in a 15-minute period that they will not put my video online. And so people are like, you spoke at TED, where's your video? And it's like, oh shit. So if you ever get invited to TED, maybe bring it down a notch and don't curse as much as I did. But
we got a question from Katie and Francisco, and they both asked it, so I thought I would bring it to your attention. What are your thoughts on crypto art and the power requirements for it to exist when we have a climate crisis?
Yeah, so I think this is a really great discussion, because this obviously came up a few days ago, where this guy Memo like wrote this paper and, you know, talking sort of about some of the power requirements and whatnot. And if it was a real struggle for me not to respond, and let me just try to do this delicately without making any enemies, which is, if you're in a room, well, no, let me back up. The first thing is the thing I'm most upset about is that skepticism has died. Okay. Somebody reads something on the internet, and because it's like written by one person, they just think it must be true because I read it on the internet. So the first thing I would say is that if you read something on the internet, you might want to start to look around at some other things to put things into perspective. So that's the first thing, is that I'm annoyed that skepticism somehow died when Donald Trump became president. Nobody questioned anything. Okay, so that's the first thing that I'm going to say. The second thing I'm going to say is that if you are in a room that has no doors and no windows, and the only thing that's in that room is a leaf, and you have a flashlight, and if you are shining that flashlight on the leaf, then the only thing that you are seeing is that leaf. You're not seeing that leaf in the context of anything else. Okay. So the first thing that I would say is that if you follow Memo's criticism of crypto art, you would find a lot of other people who are on the crypto art space that say his numbers are way off. Okay. And they start to talk about like, okay, well, when you do this thing, you're only tokenizing it once. And you made a comment that the blockchain is required like 100 times on something when it maybe is only required one time. So a lot of the data, I think, in his thing is extremely skewed. So with that, if you have skepticism and you're not just in a room shining a flashlight on a leaf, if you can back up and look at the bigger picture, in the context of things, that leaf is just that, a tiny leaf in a huge ass forest. And there are a lot of other things that we could shine a larger flashlight on that would fix a lot of this socially responsible stuff. Now, I'll back up again and also say that this is also changing. So a lot of people in the crypto art space recognize this, and there are a lot of technologies that they're trying to implement that reduce this, fingerprint that Memo has shined a light on. Okay. But I think in the grand scheme of things, everybody eating meat, for example, like the whole world not being vegan, is a exponential thing that could fix things other than cryptocurrency. Do not blame meat. So I think there are some concerns. So the point is, Hugh, I love you, man. So, yeah, don't blame meat. But the point that I'm trying to make is that, yeah, we can do better in certain things. But if you're just shining a flashlight on a leaf and not looking at all the other things, like, it's totally ironic that everyone's crazy about Tesla. But when you look at, what's required in order to make the batteries that Tesla uses, it's not as eco-friendly as everyone wants to pretend that it is. So the point is that I think it's unfair to shine a light on this one thing and say, see, this is fucking the world. No, there's a lot of other things that are fucking the world on a much larger scale than crypto art. So I find the discussion a little bit skewed. I find it a little bit biased, and I find a little bit of the information is a bit misleading.
Some questions I would add to that would be, what's the ecological cost of running a gallery or a museum that would traditionally display other types of art? I'm not going to say that it's okay or a good thing, but I mean, yeah, we should probably compare those. But
Tim, put it under a microscope. What was required to build that gallery? How many trees did we have to chop down? How much gas did we have to put in those things to chop down those trees? But like, all I'm trying to say is that if you just, shine a light on one little tiny thing, you go, oh, this is evil. And it's like, if you just back up and look at the forest, there's a lot of other things that discussion does not take into account. And so I'm not saying that things can't get better. And you've got guys like Joni Lemercier, who is a huge eco activist. Well, guess what? He's doing crypto art, but he's also engaging in these programs where maybe he donates a portion of what he makes. There are tons of sites where you can donate money that goes back into fixing things. So, you know, you could have a guy like Joni Lemercier on here and ask him that same exact question. He would say, yeah, okay, I'm making crypto art. Yeah, you know, it could be bad, but I'm also taking some of this money and putting it back into things to offset. You know, like you hear this story about business people who do that with flights. Like when they fly a ton around the world, they can do flight credits to try to, you know, offset their carbon footprint. So again, you can't just look at Memo's thing and say, oh yeah, this is, you know, this is 100% evil, when it's not, I can't even believe we're talking about it.
My other question would be, like I only just briefly looked at Memo's thing right now, but so the Ethereum and Bitcoin blockchains exist regardless of whether this practice is happening on them. So like, does it help necessarily if artists don't take the opportunity? Like, I think that Amy had a good point in chat here that, like, you know, this gives so much power to artists, you know, given that context, and that these things exist regardless. I don't know. Should we just avoid it?
And again, it's like, you know, I would just say, if you're going to read Memo's article, also look at some of the comments of people who are in crypto, who are running miners, running servers. You know, they've got a lot of feedback saying like, okay, well, a lot of this is not quite correct statistically. And one of the things that was really interesting was a lot of the data that I think Memo was pulling was based on Bitcoin, not Ethereum, which is a different, you know, it's a totally different thing. They have totally different practices. And so again, I think the data is just like a little bit skewed, but his article is great. And I'm glad that articles like that exist, but you have to have a little bit of skepticism and just say, what is the larger picture here, instead of just looking at this one thing? And if I am going to look at this one thing and I do feel bad about this one thing, what are things that I can be doing to offset that? And there are plenty of things out there to offset that.
Okay, there was another question here about the crypto stuff, so I'm gonna get back to that. So this one's from Tim Fernandez. So a lot of the liberatory promise of the internet was centered around removing scarcity from the equation that determines value. The concept of unlimited reproduction and sharing is a core theme in a lot of digital art. So how does NFT, you know, that's attempting to bring scarcity back into the value equation, alter the purpose of digital art?
Again, I think it's what's your perception of scarcity? Like, if I go back to the topic that I made before, which is, you know, you want people sharing your content. I want, you know, Beeple wants people. Listen, why does Beeple give away everything for free? He gives everything away for free is because he wants people to use it. He wants people to post it. And when people use it and people post it, it's not scarce. It's getting propagated everywhere. And he builds a bigger brand. We'll call it that. You know, like I said, what the crypto art scene allows me to do is assign value and ownership to a piece of work. And if that work that I'm making is the Mona Lisa, I want to say that Amy Traylor owns it, right? So her name is on the plaque, but hell yeah, I want people to put it on the internet. I want people to share it on Instagram and Twitter and take pictures of it and sell postcards in the gift shop. And because when they turn it over, it's gonna be like, Amy Traylor owns this, boss bitch. So I think it's not necessarily putting scarcity on the work. I think it's just putting inherent value and ownership for that piece of art. But I still want people to share the shit out of it.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily one or the other. It could be both and. Okay, so yeah, I guess just looking at some of the topics that I posted earlier. Just going back to the idea of like, you know, kind of getting paid for work that you care about. What do you think that might look like if you were just starting out? And I think I need
Perfect.
to
Let
go
me go.
back here. Yeah,
Let me go. I know exactly how to talk about this.
Cool.
Boy, have I got a story for you. I was doing work for Nokia back in the day, and I had no idea how to price my artwork. And so they would be like, hey, you want to do this campaign for this like phone, and the budget's only $1,500. I'd be like, okay, I'll do it. It's like, I don't want to pass up $1,500. And so cool, I do that project for $1,500. And then, big corporations, they're not into parting money. They're big corporations, and they're wealthy because they don't part with money. And so, they're going to try to lowball you into hell. And they'd be like, hey, $1,500. I'd be like, okay, I'll do it. And then like next month, Nokia would come back and they'd be like, wow, we really like that thing that you made for us, Josh. Well, we got another one, but the budget's only $1,500. I'd be like, okay, I'll do it. And what I had done is I had set a reputation for myself for that fucking idiot who does anything really awesome for $1,500. And so this is about assessing self-worth. And I read a really great book, and it's super thin and everyone should read it. It's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And this book I think it was commissioned by Andrew Carnegie, and it interviews the wealthiest people in America, I think at the time, and kind of finds the common thread between all of them. And so it's a really quick read. And there's a whole section on there called Assess Self-Worth. And assessing self-worth is, okay, I know the kind of work that I can create, and I know the amount of work that I'm willing to put in to do it. I know that it's quality. I'm making a quality product, and what is that worth? And so I read this book, and then I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And Nokia came back and just said, hey, Josh, how are you doing? That second project that you did was really great. It was like, oh, cool. Like, we got a third one, and but the budget's only, $1,500. And I just said, oh, thank you so much for thinking about me, but I'm really busy right now, and I can only take on like a few, projects a year. And so, I can't really take on anything now, unless it's like around $50,000. And if it's like around $50,000, then, I'll find time for it. I'll try to figure out how to work it in. And Nokia said, okay, well, we can't spend that much, maybe another time. And so then another client comes and just says, hey, I'm buddies with Brad over at Nokia. We love that shit that you're doing. And, we've got this project, but the budget's only $3,000. And so what I did is for 3 months, I turned down everything that came in, because it was all under the amount that I thought I was worth, or the amount of time and work that I was going to put into this. So what happened is that I turned everything down for 3 months, and I had $6 in my bank account. And I think I actually borrowed money to pay my mortgage the next month. I literally was broke. And there was kind of this breaking point where I just thought, what have I done? Like I've just turned down all these projects for 3 months, and I literally have $6. But what I was doing was I was telling all of these people what I was worth. I was telling all these people the amount of work I was going to do and what it was worth. The very next project that came in was $75,000. The next project that came in was $120,000. The next project that came in was $100,000. So I was sort of broadcasting to the industry, this is who I am. This is the kind of work that I make. I'm going to work really fucking hard. It's going to be really, really awesome, but it's worth this much. And so that whole idea of like assessing self-worth, I think is really important, because if you are in a position where you're underselling yourself, and the funny story is that my buddy Brad leaves Nokia and he says, hey man, I just got to tell you, you had a reputation at Nokia for doing awesome work for really, really cheap. And so I had to try to break that reputation. And so read Think and Grow Rich. It's a self-help book. It's obviously about business, but you know, I didn't know how to do that stuff. I didn't know how to have conversations with people about money. And I was just taking anything that came in, and I literally was starving. So I think if you could read that book, it's a really quick read, and it's really helped me as an artist and designer to say, okay, you know, this is my self-worth, and this is the amount of work that I'm going to put in for something, and you're going to get something really great. And don't be afraid to turn stuff down. I think if you turn stuff down, you're telling other companies and agencies the caliber of work that you're doing and the price that's associated with that, so that when they do come back, you're going to like the budgets.
Yeah, I think that's something that I have definitely been trying to learn and break out of, is like just thinking about the opportunity cost of, you know, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to everything else. So what are you saying no to? Even if it is, you know, $1,500 and you really need it, you know, you might be saying no to the $75,000 that comes along, but you're now too busy doing the $1,500 project.
And again, like, you know, this also ties into happiness. And, you know, Stefan Sagmeister did a really great piece on happiness. Like, how much money do you really need to make in order to be happy? And what I found is that it's not a lot. Like, I can make 75,000 a year and I'm pretty happy. Like, you know, that means that I can do a few things and then play video games and smoke cigars and go skateboarding and do other things. So my quality of life is a lot better if I say, you know, this is what I need to make a year. And cool, if I only need to make $75,000, then I only need to do like 1, 2, or 3 projects a year. Because I found that, like, I'll tell you right now, the best year I ever had was I made, I think, $410,000, and I was fucking miserable because I was doing so much work. Like, I had no free time. I was up until like 4 a.m. every night trying to meet deadlines because I was just taking on too much. And I found like the more money I made, it meant the more projects I was doing. And it just meant that I was generally more unhappy. And so I think you need to like really have a heart to heart with yourself and just say, like, how much money do I need to make in order to really be happy? And I found it's really not that much. Now, would I like to make $400,000 every year? Sure. I just don't want to do all the work that's involved in making that kind of money. I mean, it's terrible, but you know, I'm willing to work really hard for 75,000. Are you guys having fun?
Yeah,
Definitely.
All right, cool.
I'm a big fan of your bins, Josh. I like your collection of bins with all the junk you got.
Dude, Hugh, the other day I was live streaming with, I mean, not live streaming, I was video chatting with G-Monk, and I think he posted on his Instagram, Josh Davis, container store.
Right.
So let me tell you actually about this, because I actually think this is really important. And Hugh, you've been here to my studio. There was a point in time when my studio was like I collected books and other designy things. And
oh, it was very austere. It was very austere.
Posters and books and all this. And like, I would like have this whole wall used to be like design books. And like, I would pull like a book off a wall and like look at it once, and then I would put it on the bookshelf and like never again. Yet all of the shit that I needed in order to be creative was like upstairs in a bin behind a brick wall. I had to fight a dragon to get to it. And so I'm watching like Casey Neistat on YouTube, and he like one of his videos, he like turns and he shows his studio, and it's just like, oh my God, like look at all those toys, like look at all that creative stuff. In order to be creative, like, why the fuck do I have like vinyl toys and books that I never look at? And so I literally did this shift where I took all of that stuff that I would just not, that I like, but I actually moved it upstairs. And if I want to get to a book, I have to fight a dragon to get to a book. But I actually moved all that stuff upstairs. And then I just turned this into like all of the stuff that I walk in, and that wall just says, it's time to get creative, motherfucker. You see me? I'm a bin full of shit. I'm a bin full of shit, ready to fucking kick ass and make stuff. And it changed the dynamic. Like now I walk into my studio and it's just like, yeah, this is where shit happens, because
inspiration is easy if your stuff is at hand, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's funny, I put all this stuff together, and I was having this video chat with this one gallerist last week, and we get on this like Zoom call, and she goes, whoa. And I said, what? And she's like, you mean that's not like a Zoom fake background? Like that's your actual studio? And I'm like, it's my actual studio. So I think environment, if we ever wanted to talk about like inspiration, creativity, procrastination, how you design the space that you work in, I think is instrumental in remaining creative. And so I've kind of designed my studio in a way where I walk in and it's just like, it's like tech porn. I can just look at stuff and go, oh, okay, I can see all the things that that help me be creative. And if I want to go look at those books, they're upstairs, and I'm not knocking, those books, but I've just found it extremely helpful to sort of design the space that makes you the best version of yourself,
Yeah, the books are an affectation, and the shit you actually need they need to be within grasp, all the.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, you're into a lot of physical computing, Hugh, and it's like, if you walk into your studio, you may just like glance up at something and just get a spark of an idea, like, oh, I wonder if I could, you never know what's going to hit your eyeballs and be like, oh yeah, I just saw that LED thing with like this sensor. I wonder. And then all of a sudden you're tinkering, and the next thing
like the $5 Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, man.
There's a really good video by Adam Savage on YouTube. He does his how to make shit in a day stuff. And he did the same thing. He built himself an airbrush stand because he's like, I love my airbrushes, but they're always in a box out of the way. And so he makes an airbrush stand, and he goes, now my airbrush is right there. It's easy to get to. And he just airbrushes all the time, just when he's making his props and his cosplay crap and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the same principle.
So yeah, changing my studio was super helpful in being a conduit to inspiration, because everything that can become a possibility is within eyesight. And as soon as I walk in, it's just like, what do you want to do today, bitch?
Yeah, 100%.
Just thinking back to the beginning of the call here, Josh, you were talking about some different platforms. And I think Darren might have kind of started on this, but I wonder, related to what you were just talking about, like physical space, and how that kind of prepares you for being creative. How do you think that applies to like environments, like in terms of software, or like what's happening on your computer?
Yeah, so I kind of have like a weird practice where, like, I typically don't sketch. I don't start with paper and pencil. And I know that's like maybe counterintuitive. Like I see all these, like, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but I see all these designers that, like, it always starts on paper, and I'm just sort of like sketching out these ideas. And then, these sketches like move into this thing and become more formulated. Like for me, that just seems like a very linear path. And it doesn't leave chances for accidents. And so I typically never start with paper. I literally start with code. And not only do I start with code, but I generally don't have a destination in mind. Maybe have like a seed of an idea, of like a spark of inspiration. And so I'm big into sort of mutation and iteration. So I may take like a really simple idea, like, okay, I'm going to make a grid, and I make a grid. And then, okay, well, how can I make a grid and then change something? And, by the time I'm done, like, here's a perfect example. I was pinged a couple of years ago by somebody at Warp to possibly do some stuff for Aphex Twins. And so I just sat down and just started writing code. And by the time I was done, I had like 70 programs. And, some of them were great, and some of them were like, all right, okay. And I didn't really have a destination in mind. So like when I'm in a piece of software, I think the more I think about an endpoint, usually the worse it is, because what will happen is I'll get to that endpoint and I'm like, okay, well, like what now? And so if I can come into software with not a destination in mind, then what happens is wandering. And in that wandering, I find things, I discover things, I discover ways of applying to things that maybe get me to a destination that I would never have thought of. And so a lot of times I think about like a tree, and you've sort of got like a trunk, and that trunk is kind of like your seed idea that you're going to start with, and then it literally branches off, and then it forks, and then it branches off, and then it forks, and so by the time I'm done, I've got a tree, but I've got kind of all these different branches that I've sort of exhausted trying to reach some kind of destination. And in that, 90% of the stuff is shit. But 10%, like, this branch was awesome, that branch is awesome. So I've just gotten, really in the practice of stream of consciousness, like kind of like a meditation, like starting with an idea and just seeing where I end up. Because I'm the type of person that if I visualize the end point, then I just walk the path, and then there's no deviation from that path. And so I just like stream of consciousness in software. And I think that's why I break a lot of stuff. That's why I'm constantly calling Ben, going, Ben, I've set the code on fire. Please help. Like, how did I break this? The other thing that I would also say, and I'm going to say it right now, is I'm going to relate this to skateboarding. When I started skateboarding, I only got better when I surrounded myself around other people who were better skateboarders. Ben Fox on here is so much better than me in so many ways, but he's a friend. He's a guy that I can go to and just say, Ben, how can I make this better? How can I look at this code that I'm making and help me? And so I think, that has helped me in software too, is by surrounding myself around people who I idolize, and also sort of say, well, here's how you can do things, this way. So I think it's not only that I want to sort of wander and be surprised in software. I also want to surround myself with people who are way better than me, because you know, they'll make walking that path a lot better than me taking off all my clothes and crawling on my hands and knees. No, bad Hugh.
in the brambles.
yeah.
I mean, I'm
Look at me,
happy
Ben. I'm naked in the bushes. You know, Josh, please put on clothes. And
I think that would be okay, Anderson.
bad, Ben, bad.
Or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to hear about the, you know, the first part of that. Personally, I mean, I'm not sure if anyone else on the call resonates with that, but that's something I've struggled with. Like, I definitely identify more on the design side of design and art, but like you described, that seems to be you know, visualized as, you know, you have all of the drawings in place and you know exactly what the endpoint is. But like, I think my process is a lot more like yours for sure, where you kind of just, you have a vague idea of what it might be, and then you kind of just try things, and then, you know, that sometimes that means you waste a bunch of time on 90% garbage, like you said, but then those 10% are things that you probably couldn't have even sketched up in the first place. So
Yeah,
that's a really interesting point. I'm glad to hear that, you know, that's how you work as well.
and I think this also ties into sharing code too. I think this is a big thing to talk about. Like, a lot of people ask me, like, why would you open source your code? Like, really early on, Flash, for example, was a closed environment. Like, you wouldn't, you know, give away the FLAs. The FLA was like, it was the gold. It was the source code. You didn't share that with anybody. You compiled it to a Swift, and then the Swift, that was the thing that went on the internet. Why would you give this stuff away? And I had a lot of people, like, early on in the early PlayStation days, ask me, like, why do you give stuff away? And the reason why I gave stuff away is because people like Ben Fox, or, you know, people like Brandon Hall would take my code and they'd be like, oh my, holy shit, dude, this is terrible. Like, look, do you not know about modulo? Like, you just wrote, you know, 500 lines of code and you could have written it in one. And so in the early days, I was giving away code because people would fix, because I didn't know anything about programming, people would fix my code and give it back to me. And then I would learn. I'd be like, okay, I now love modulo. I now don't use, you know, if else conditionals, use switch cases. What the fuck are switch cases? Oh, okay, well, this is a switch case. You know, so by giving away source code, I found that, you know, not only would people like fix mistakes that I was making, or they would teach me alternative ways to do things, but some people who were also creative would take my code, add on to it, and then give it back to me. So for every like source file that I gave away, I would give it back like 50 times with people who had added on to it. And I'd just be like, oh, holy shit. Like, okay, all right, cool. All right, learned that. So like, I was learning a lot more by giving away code. And so now, just on Twitter the other day, I had a Japanese student say, hey, you know, I like your hype, you know, library, but I'm trying to do something, you know, can you help me do it? Yeah, here's how you do it. And, you know, here's the zip on Dropbox. But I would post that on Twitter and people were like, oh my God, he just posted the zip, you know, and then people would like take that, and again, they would sort of mutate and give it back. So I think there's also enormous value in giving away the source code. Don't hoard it.
There was a talk, like one of the first talks I saw you at was in you. I think, well, it wasn't the first talk I saw you at because I've been following you for a while. But you remember Geeky by Nature?
Mm-hmm.
And Jared did a talk, and he like Hugh will attest to this because I know Hugh was there as well. And at Geeky by Nature in 2010, Jared Tarbell made a talk, and he said about source code is like cheese. And you got this really nice piece of cheese. If you hoard it and you keep it in your fridge and you never share it and you sit on it, it's going to go bad. If you put it out and you share it with the world, you're sharing this piece of cheese and everyone can enjoy it. I thought that was kind of nice.
Beautiful.
It.
I saw
Very
something.
Jared.
Yeah.
I saw something the other day too that said, no matter how famous you think you are, you'll never be as popular as cheese.
And the way you're talking about it, it's almost like the exquisite corpse in some ways, because it's like, you know, you draw a little piece, someone draws something else based on what you did, and it seeds this sort of collaborative randomness, right?
Yeah.
In a way, giving away the code is, and people adding to it is itself a generative process of art.
Yeah. I mean, Ben can talk about this. I mean, me and Ben both are kind of working on hype the most, I would say, just the two of us. Well, we've got this guy in Australia, Garth, who, you know, we've got everything up on God, I just blanked, GitHub. He pushes all the time, like, okay, I've taken your code and I really need the library to do this. So I've pushed a bunch of extra stuff. And then we can, you know, me and Ben can kind of review that stuff and go, okay, well, I think that'll be helpful to other people, or clearly this is super weird and only Garth is going to use this. So there's stuff that obviously we kick out. But yeah, I think contributing software and have other people to contribute it just means that the sort of your sandbox gets a little bit bigger. So yeah, I can, you know, just share. You have everything to gain. I think this was a common question of people. People would constantly ask, like, how the hell does that guy make money? He gives everything away. And he does, he gives everything away. And then all of a sudden, you know, Louis Vuitton says, hey, Mike, you know, can we use a bunch of your images on our, you know, our bags, which they did. And the payday was huge. So you'd be surprised how much giving stuff away can be profitable.
That's how he got. Didn't Katy Perry reach out? Or Katy Perry's people, they reached out to him as well. And they were like, "Oh, hey, let's do some visual stuff," because of what they'd seen him putting out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and the funny thing too, like when it comes to code, and I'm sure Tim can talk about this as well, is a lot of people will take your code and they'll try to do, you know, something, and then just be like, okay, fuck it, just hire him. And then they'll email and be like, okay, we don't know what we're doing. Can you help us? So you'd be surprised when you give stuff away, people try to then use it and they'll be like, we don't know what we're doing. Can we hire you? So yeah, free can be very profitable. That's such a weird sentence.
I just heard it in a barbecue show the other day. They say a good pit master will give you his entire recipe and say, good luck.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that idea. Well, how are you doing? Are you? We're coming up on 2 hours. Are you feeling like we're good?
I've got a beautiful cigar from Esteli, Nicaragua. I couldn't be happier.
So much cigar left. So much cigar left.
Well, is that the timer? That's the cigar right there? That's the
Actually,
this is the timer, kids.
You know the philosopher Alan Watts, the Buddhist
yeah, of
guy?
course.
That was how long he would lecture, was how long it took to smoke one cigar.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that topic of you know, giving things away fits in with just the entire sentiment about how, you know, crypto art is filling a void as well, and how sort of traditional models don't really and maybe shouldn't really apply to this digital work because it's not traditional. So yeah, I think getting more people involved is always a positive for everyone.
If you smoke it right, Darren, are you taking shots at me?
No, I'm saying you're doing it right. I'm saying somebody would smoke it incorrectly and then they wouldn't appreciate it. That's the problem. It's all about appreciating it, right? Appreciating the moment.
That's it. It's my meditation.
Yeah.
So I think we touched on most of the topics that I was kind of thinking about beforehand, which is awesome.
I have not looked at the chat at all. Did we miss anything in the chat?
I've been trying to keep tabs on that. I'm sorry if I missed any. If there's a burning question that I did miss, maybe if you guys can repost it. But I would be curious about you were kind of talking about like Unreal and Notch, real-time stuff.
Yeah, let's
talk about that.
Yeah, so let me just say a couple of things. And again, I imagine most of you know this, but I mean, when I talk in a much larger scale in front of people, I think it's nice to talk about like what should people be looking at, and Ben can attest to this. GLSL is probably like the most important thing, I think, from a coding aspect that you can be learning. Why? Because GLSL can happen on the web in WebGL. It can happen in processing. It can happen in open frameworks. It can happen in Touch Designer. It can happen. Tim, do you know, do they support GLSL in Unreal? I haven't done enough tinkering to know if it's supported.
Yeah, I believe it is. I haven't really delved into that myself.
Yeah. So
Unreal supports shaders of some sort.
Yeah, but yeah, I was trying to remember if it was GLSL or not. Notch does not support GLSL, but it supports a flavor of it called YLSL, and it can be moderate to port. So if you're comfortable doing GLSL, you can kind of pick up YLSL. Mostly that's because Notch, I think, is built using DirectX, and DirectX does not have GLSL support, I think. Don't yell at me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to remember at the top of my head. But in terms of programming environments, I think GLSL is probably one of the most important things that you can learn. And how did I learn it? I thought I had it somewhere close, but maybe I don't. Where would I have put it? I don't know. Shit. I learned it from this guy, Patricio Gonzalez, who runs a thing called Book of Shaders. Amy is holding it up right now. It is called the Pixel Spirit Deck. And I think it's in its third printing thing right now. It sells out pretty quick, but you can type in Pixel Spirit Deck into Google. The beautiful thing about it that Amy is showing right now is that there is an image on one side and then there is the code on the other side. And so for me, that was like a really easy way to get into learning how GLSL works. I think the first card is like all black and you just learn how to make the screen black. And then it progressively gets more and more complex and you kind of learn the inner workings of GLSL. So I think from a programming aspect, for creative coding, GLSL is really changing things. Why is that? Because you're basically doing all the graphics computation on the GPU. So this should like move into another discussion, which is I have left Apple. I no longer use Apple products. I got rid of my iPhone. I got rid of using Mac, and I have switched over almost exclusively to PC. And that's because, for $3,000 or $4,000, I can build a machine that Apple would charge me $30,000 for. And not only that, I can put in a GPU, and that GPU is, for what video game guys use to play video games, but it moves all of the graphics processing onto that card, which means that I can do real-time stuff 60 frames per second. So I've left Mac. I'm now almost entirely on PC. Notch only runs on PC. Touch Designer runs its best on PC, even though there is a port for Mac. It's missing a lot of stuff because Mac doesn't have, I think, DirectX support, something like that. So I've moved to PC, and I would then say, I think Notch is a really interesting thing. Again, you can get that free trial and you can start making stuff. Like you can do a bunch of tutorials. The nice thing about Notch is that you have to sign up with an email, and then they give, in that email, they give you like, well, here's a bunch of free tutorial stuff. So you can actually be looking at YouTube tutorials, build the stuff in Notch to kind of get a feel for how it works and not have to pay a single penny. So I think Notch is really, really interesting. I even like it more than Touch Designer. I think Touch Designer, and I think it's just like, it gives me bad Flash vibes where you can like nest code within code within code within code, and where the fuck did I put that code, and how many things do I have to click into to find where the fuck I put that code. So it just freaks me out because it reminds me of the horrors of Flash so much that, some people like that in Touch Designer. It drives me absolutely crazy. Notch, everything is just kind of, nesting is kind of really not a thing in Notch. I think you probably can do it to some degree, but really everything is just kind of on one node board. So I do like Notch. Unreal, I would say Tim can talk about this more than anybody because he's doing some amazing experiments using Unreal. Unreal, I would say, is probably the biggest thing in demand right now. At Zero Space, we converted 2 rooms into XR production sets. And so that is what they used for The Mandalorian, which is you've got LED wall and you don't use green screen anymore. You can virtually project a scene, and actors can literally see the spaceship flying by. They're not just looking at a green wall. So I can tell you right now in our industry, there are not enough Unreal technicians, and the payday is astronomical. Unreal is probably the hottest thing right now. And so now you're going to say, yeah, but Josh, what about Unity? Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about that. What I like to do is I like to look at things that sort of compete in the space and then ask people who use that tool why they picked one over the other. So I asked a bunch of people and I say, hey, you're doing Unity. Tell me about Unity. Well, like, what do you like about Unity? Oh, like, I really like Unity. Like, Unity's great. It kind of it's like Flash 2.0. Again, freaks me out. But, oh, it's, I love Unity. Okay, cool, great. And then you ask Unreal people like, hey, why did you pick Unreal? And almost every Unreal person is going to say this. Well, I started in Unity. And then you go, oh, and I started in Unity, and then I hit a ceiling and I realized I couldn't do some of the things that I really needed to do. So I moved to Unreal. So if you look at that environment and go, oh, okay, why would I start in an environment that ultimately is going to piss me off to move me to Unreal? I should just go straight to Unreal. So I'm not, God, now somebody's going to look at this video and they're going to be like fanboys of Unity. And like the next day they're going to be like, fuck Josh Davis. He hates Unity. No, I'm sure Unity's fine. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Don't use it. Don't use it. Just go straight to Unreal. So yeah, I think Unreal is really exciting because you can program in it, and you got people like deadmau5 who are doing virtual concerts in Unreal. The untapped potential of Unreal is kind of next level. And the nice thing is here in my studio, obviously I have a Mac, I don't use it. I've got a PC and I've also got a Linux box, and Unreal actually compiles on all 3 of those devices. So even if you want to get away from PC and use Linux, you actually can compile Unreal using Linux, and it actually works quite well. So I would say right now, if you're going to stick with programming, GLSL I think is really awesome, and Unreal is really awesome. And both of those things are free. Unreal does not cost any money. Tim's like, yeah, but yes, but the point is you can download the environment, you can start working in it, and it doesn't cost you any money. So I think right now Unreal and GLSL are kind of my hot tech. tips.
I got a question. Someone also asked about Godot. Have you used that tool at all?
No, I don't know it.
It's another game engine. I'm less familiar, but
all I know is I'm always waiting for it.
Yeah, I think Godot
is obscure. Sorry, waiting for Godot. Anyway.
Yeah, I think just like not to fan flames, because people are always going to take sides on these things.
Sure.
Personally, I did my experiments for a few months in Unity and then a few months in Unreal. So I'm not going to claim to be any kind of expert in either one. But the way that I frame it is like, for example, when I wanted to do VR in Unity, I had to go through like a 15-part half-hour video YouTube series to get that all set up and working, and get like controllers and visualizing my hands and stuff. And on Unreal, I literally just opened the example project and plugged in my headset, and it worked. Yeah. And the tools already existed. I didn't need to build them from scratch.
Totally. There's like a whole Puppet thing in Unreal. It just works. I would also say the same thing for Notch. You can build a completely 3D environment inside of Notch, and then all of a sudden in the node list, it's like a VR camera. And you'd be like, what? And you can literally just drop out a VR camera, and all of a sudden I put on my VR headset, and the thing that I made in Notch, I'm now looking at, and it's plug and play. It just works, which is brilliant. So even for VR, I think Unreal has an unfair advantage, and so does Notch. Now, on most of this XR stuff, right? So the XR production stuff is used using a server, which is really expensive. It's called a Disguise server, but the Disguise server accepts Notch and Unreal. So yeah, good to know.
Yeah, but I think, regardless of which platform you pick, people are making cool stuff. So don't want to, completely exclude anyone who's chosen something else.
Yeah. Hey, Amy, Amy, I want to answer you for a second. If you go onto Steam, there is a really great thing on Steam called Fantasynth, and it's made by Hello Enjoy or Hello Color. I can't even remember.
Yes, Hello Enjoy. Carlos
Alua. Carlos Alua.
Yeah, I don't know how to say his name.
Carlos Alua, yeah. And that is an amazing VR piece. And it's sort of a generative music video that you sort of fly through. It was done a couple of years ago. I think it was only like a couple of bucks to buy it from Steam, and it will blow you away. So your question is, have I ventured much into VR? And the answer is yes, because I've been playing with Notch. So I have been doing some stuff at VR using Notch because it's really easy. Again, you can just drag out this VR camera, literally put on your headset, and it'll be like, hey, I drag out a VR camera, and it'd be like, oh, you got the HTC Vive? Cool. The thing that you just made, you can see it in VR. You put on the headset, you're like, holy shit, I made my artwork. It just works. Now, the question is how do I feel about VR? The entry point is pretty steep. Like I had to build, like a $4,000 computer with the cost of the VR headset, so it's about a $4,000 investment to really, see VR at a good quality. And unfortunately, if you sort of look at the sort of landscape of VR, not a lot of people have this. And so it's like, okay, I want to dabble, but I don't know if I want to totally say, okay, cool, that's the route that I'm going to go down. Because I know that the entry point for people to experience that is a very niche community. Will it get better? Yeah, I mean, we hope so. We hope that it'll become more commonplace. But right now, I think the VR community is small. And if you do want to kind of follow that scene, my favorite guy right now is Sam Flores. No, is it Sam? No. Yeah. No, Sam Rolfes. I'm killing it. I'm sorry, Sam. If you watch this, don't kill me. Hold on. I'm just going to look right here. Yeah. So Sam, this is him. And let me just share my screen, which I think is this one. This guy, Sam, is amazing. So he's doing all of this stuff in Unreal. He's doing all this stuff for VR. He's doing some really exciting experiences that you can go experience. So if you'd like to look more into this kind of scene, like Sam would be a guy that I would absolutely check out because he's murdering it. So a part of me like feels bad because Sam is killing it so hard that I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to be over here in this corner because Sam exists. So yeah, I mean, I'm dabbling in it. I think it's a nice thing to dabble in, but I just think the point of entry is a little niche right now. So I'm a little hesitant to throw all my eggs into that basket. But the fact that you've got Unreal and Notch that just automatically hook into it means that you can be in those environments. You can start to try some things. And, you know, if you've got access to that equipment, you don't have to jump through a hoop of fire to get it to work, which is cool. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thread that I'm getting there is like real time is kind of the important place where things are heading. Maybe that's just my opinion, but you know, all of the things you're talking about, like GLSL, Unreal, like
Yeah.
the beautiful part of all of those is not waiting for renders and you know, just seeing it happen in real time in front of you.
And to be honest, like the big game changer, in my honest opinion, was Travis Scott and his concert in Fortnite. Holy shit, did that blow everybody's eyeballs out, right? And so I think that was like the real game changer. And you had guys like Deadmau5 going like, well, wait a minute, I know Unreal. Like, why am I not building these kind of experiences, but outside of the game engine? And so for me, I think that concert that he did in Fortnite was kind of like the real eye opener, like, oh, wait a minute, like concert as place, music video as place, you know? I think when everybody saw that concert, and if you haven't, my God, please YouTube it. That concert that Travis Scott did in Fortnite, I think really sort of set the landscape of what could be. I know I was blown away, totally blown away.
Josh, maybe you have a different answer to this, but Amy's just asking about if in Unreal we're using code or blueprints like the node editor. Personally, I've pretty much exclusively used blueprints just because it's just, as a visual thinker, I find it just so much easier to put together and conceptualize like what's happening. C++, I can do it, but if I can at all avoid it, I would rather just avoid it. So, but you can absolutely do both. But I haven't found a ceiling in terms of like performance or anything with blueprints, so I don't really see the reason to use C++ necessarily.
Yeah, so everything that I've done has just been blueprints as well. I have not written any C++ in Unreal. There's been enough stuff that you can sort of drag out and plug and play without having to write custom code. That's not to say that you couldn't become some, you know, higher existential being by writing C++ and Unreal and, you know, and then being that guy or that woman. There's a lot that you can pull off without having to write a drop of code inside of Unreal. Oh, great. Yeah, I absolutely want to talk about GANs.
But I mean, do you?
I don't.
We should have a Derek episode.
I would say that Derek, and maybe we should. What is Derek on?
It's like DVSMTHD.
Yeah, here
I
I'm
think.
gonna post it here. I'm gonna post this in the chat, party people. Okay. That is the only guy that I like that's using GANs. Am I the only person who hates these things? I absolutely do not like GANs at all. And the thing that kills me is that like when I look at all this stuff and I'm like, how is this not like the Morph Kai Power Goo program that we had like 25 years ago that would like morph from like a cat to a Ferrari, and it would just like, so,
oh, come on.
Oh, I hate it. I don't like GANs at all. I just, GANs look like GANs. This is exactly why I hated Flash. And there was a point at the end where, people would say like, oh, here's that guy, or here's that gal, they're a great Flash designer, or they're that Flash guy, or they're that Flash girl. They were always associated with the technology. And that always drove me nuts that like, no, I'm not a Flash person. It just happens to be the tool that I use, but I've got ideas. And if I can find any technology that helps me best execute those ideas, then I'll use that, like we've never said that Chuck Anderson is that great Photoshop guy. No, he's just Chuck Anderson, a great guy that makes art. And so it's always bothered me that people want to like attach a certain technology with the person. And unfortunately, GANs just look like GANs. And I don't care who you are. They just look like GANs. They just look like, it's like in the very beginning, when they first took off, I was like, okay, if I got to look at another bad slug puppy acid trip, I'm going to punch a bulldog.
Oh, I got my.
He has a bulldog, everyone. I'm sorry. So, my problem is that I don't know. GANs just look like GANs, and I just can't look past the technology. And so, is there a better way to do them? Like if I were doing GANs, if GANs were the only thing that I had access to, I would be trying everything in my power to use that so that it didn't look like itself. I would want to use the power of something to make something that's unexpected, or that like, so people would say like, well, how'd you make that? Like, oh, well, I use that using AI, or, using GANs. My problem is that the technology is too visible. And so everybody in the space ends up looking like everybody in the space. And so I don't like it. I think the only reason why I like Derek's stuff, and again, if you take the time at looking at his stuff, I think he's doing something really unique where like he'll train it on flowers, or the heckle, like the old school diagrams of things. And so his GANs typically tend to look like something unexpected. So unfortunately, I am not the champion of GANs. I'm not a fan.
Derek has that really nice one that's floral that just like morphs one pattern into another. I think it's like I can see your screen there, the third one on Instagram.
Yeah,
pretty good.
Yeah, again, I posted the link. You guys should look at his stuff. He's really the only person so far that I've really enjoyed, because he's doing something so totally different. But there's still that kind of transitional stuff that says, "Hey, I'm a GAN." You're like, "Okay, you're a GAN." Okay.
I did see one interesting use case. Like I've experimented with them a bit, and I think I agree that it kind of just ends up looking like a GAN if you just kind of use it out of the box. But I saw a talk. There's a company, and I think Unity actually acquired them, but that they're using machine learning algorithms like GANs in production pipelines. So the idea being, rather than producing the final piece of work, they would use GANs to replace things that usually take people a whole bunch of man hours, like stitching together textures to make them seamless.
Yeah.
So like a GAN can do that 80, 90, maybe even 100% as well as a person can in a matter, like a fraction of a second. And so then when you're looking at like, you know, game production, something where you're literally spending thousands of man hours doing such a menial task, you can then use GANs to replace that in a way that, you know, a person probably still needs to look at it and like fix the weirdness at the end. But I thought that was a pretty interesting use case for them.
Yeah. I'm not hating.
You cannot take longer to respond to that. Yeah. Total fucking silence.
Least uncomfortable pause ever.
Tim knows I love him. Gan's not.
This is how I get kicked out of Zoom meetings.
Hey, Hugh and Ben, you've had your time. That's it.
Yeah. And that's not to say that the space won't mature and other things, you know, will happen. But again, I keep coming back to that. The thing that I just don't like is that the technology is too present. And for me, I think it ends up just being a crutch in a way. It's like, I want to express myself in a way that's unique and not, you know, I think that what's nice for me and having switched to processing and GLSL to make stuff, you wouldn't believe how many comments I get on my Instagram page, like, what renderer is this? Or what software are you using? You know, the fact that I can hide the tools so that the thing that I'm making is just as expressive as it can be and is not dependent on the limitations of the thing itself is kind of where I'm at. And so that's why I'm just, you know, I have not looked at the GAN space at all, purely because the technology is too present. I don't want the technology to be present.
To get
And
off
I
of
hate,
GANs,
and I'm sorry, I also hate Python. Fuck you,
Uh-oh.
Python. Fuck you, Python. You're a shitty language. You're an absolutely.
It's just indents. It's all just indents.
Oh my God. It's just like, hey man, just bang a keyboard and compile. I'll try it. Python. Woo! Hate it. Absolutely hate it. And everyone loves it.
Not everyone.
And hey, I would just say this is probably why I've stuck with processing so long. You know, I've got so many people ask me like, why don't you go to open frameworks? So, you know, I spent like a couple of months doing some stuff in open frameworks. And the thing that I didn't like about open frameworks in C++ is that you spent so much time doing setup, right? So you got to create your project file and, hey, I'm going to make a class. Okay, cool. Tell me about that class. Okay, well, this class is going to talk to this class. Well, I need to know about that class. And so C++, you end up spending like all this time sort of defining what you're going to do before you ever do it. And so for me, it's like, I just want to get to sketching. I just want to like do some things, you know, in a very quick way. And so this is why I love processing and I love Java, is because you can sort of like rapidly sketch and just like get ideas out without having to do all that setup time. So the one extreme is, you know, that's why I've kind of stayed away from C++ is because it is so strict. Yeah. But, you know, can I put 2 million particles on screen? I can't, you know, so I know what the limitations are. I'm never going to get 2 million particles in a fluid simulation like I could in C++. And that's because when you do all that setup time in C++ and you're defining everything that could happen, right? You've got better garbage collection, you've got better processing. So it's going to run a shit ton better, right? But the trade-off is you're spending all that time in setup. So that's why I've really stuck with processing, is because I know I can like rapidly sketch, and I don't have to define every class that I'm going to make. I just need to kind of sort of do the guts of the main sketch, and then I can do other things, and it'll just work. So I do like some structure, and maybe this is why I don't like Python, is because at least with processing, there is some structure. Like, okay, you're creating a function, you're creating a class. Hey, there's this thing called end of line. It's a nice little semicolon that you put at the end of things that let you know that when you're done. And Python's just like, oh, who needs those? Who needs semicolons? It's just like, just tab everything and everything will be okay. And then all of a sudden you try to run it and you'd be like, there's something wrong with your tabs. It's just like, I just can't. But some people love Python. Some people like that looseness of not being so strict. I like a little bit of structure. This is why I like Java. This is why I like processing, is that there's a little bit of structure to sort of construct things, but it's not as strict as C++. Everybody loves Python. I can't stand it.
So there's a question in chat that I've been meaning to get to for a little bit here. So I think we should touch on that. And I think we might have touched on this a little bit, but he's asking about, he's an undergraduate computing science student. He got into creative coding, just kind of way to blend, the art and code that he loves. And so basically he's spending his time, working as a more sort of traditional software engineer, but wants to like transition to making more creative stuff. And yeah, I guess he's wondering what that path might look like in terms of like monetizing his art as a beginner.
Yeah, again, I think, this is, I kind of touched on this in the beginning, which is, like I put in the work. I worked for a studio that, I had to kind of do the normal graphic design stuff, or, you could be a developer that's working for a place that's doing the normal, developer stuff. It's what you do in your off time. And, it's like, for me, I would work 8 hours in a studio. And then, when you get home, what do? You could be that person that sits on the couch, or you can be that person that puts in a little bit of time doing this other thing that you think is inspiring or creative. And so, I was doing 8 hours in the studio, and then I was doing 8 hours at home, where I was doing this kind of creative stuff, and I was putting in that time. And, I've been doing this for 25 years. And so time takes time. So it took me some time of spending that time doing other creative things. And eventually, I was in a position where those two could replace each other. So that was the Volkswagen thing. So, the Volkswagen thing was somebody paying me to do my sort of creative things, but it was still for a brand, and I was able to make money. I've got a really good friend, James Victori, and I love James to death. My fear is that James is that guy where if you look at any of his videos, he'd be like, quit your job, set the world on fire, do everything, be creative, do that. And I don't think that's realistic. But I understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to motivate people to do what they love and to be themselves. But, I think you also have to, buy food and actually be a person who operates in society. And so I think there's a way to do both, where, you can have that developer job where you're doing things, and then it's what are you doing on free time? And if you're doing this creative work on that free time, you'd be surprised that the more you post, and again, this is why I love Instagram, is I can constantly be sort of shitting out to the world, these are the things that I'm interested in. Hugh's a perfect example of, if you look at Hugh's Instagram feed, hey, I'm 3D printing stuff. Like, you need a Mandalorian helmet. I know how to do that. And I can give you any information on printing that thing. And hey, you want to put LED lights in it? And I've got, so, Hugh is a guy who has sort of tailored his Instagram feed towards the thing that he's interested in. And he'll be the first to tell you, you know, some of the jobs that he's gotten is stuff that, you know, hey, here's an Arduino board that's connected to a bunch of LEDs and it's, you know, online for everybody to see. And they're like, okay, well, you know, I really want a really kick-ass Mandalorian helmet that has LED lights in it. And well, Hugh's done it, you know, so.
Well, listen, hold on a minute. It's a combination of the skill sets required to do the stuff I do professionally, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't make a bunch of Mandalorian helmets. I make boxes for machines that I design for installations. So that's that concept of doing the thing that you want to do so that people will pay you for it. That's the curation of the Instagram feed. I 3D print shit for myself, but it's part of a skill set that is a extrapolation of the thing that I'm actually good at. If somebody says, can you do a Mandalorian? I'm like, no, it's a giant waste of my time. But if you want me to help you build an installation that involves a whole bunch of electronics and motors and lights and whatnot, I'm down. But yeah, no, Star Wars props are my little, this is just shit I'm doing, right?
I think if there was a student that was watching this video and you were in university, the greatest gift that you could learn is that you're going to go to school. Those teachers are going to give you assignments, but it's also 4 years of free time outside of those projects. So yes, I've got to draw something for class, but I also have 4 years to figure out what my voice is. What am I trying to say? What's the kind of work that I'm interested in that hopefully, let me tell you something. Okay. And you'll love this story. I'm down in St. Louis, I'm up in St. Louis at an AIGA portfolio review. And this kid comes up, right? We're at a bunch of tables. They bring in like a bunch of professionals and we're doing like portfolio reviews. And this kid puts his book in front of me and I open up the book and the first page is fantastic. The graphic design is so good. It has such a great texture to it. He's kind of like nailing it. Turn the page. Second page, fantastic. Third page, fantastic. Fourth page, absolute dog shit. And I'm looking at the fourth page and it's like, holy, okay, wow. What's this? He's like, oh, that was an assignment that my teacher gave me to build a mock website. I said, it's terrible. And he says, oh. I say, yeah. But you know what? You're hired. He says, what? I said, you're hired. I've looked at this fourth page and you're hired. And I want you to do this the rest of your career. And then I looked at the kid and he like turned white. He's like, oh, but I don't want to do that. And I said, well, then why the fuck is it in your book? He's like, well, it's in my book because my teacher told me I needed to put it in my book so that I could show you that I knew how to do it. And I said, but is that what you want to do? Said, no. Then don't put it in your book. The first 3 pages are great. Your whole portfolio should just be those first 3 pages. Like, look at me. I'm fucking awesome. End of story. And so, really valuable lesson in make the type of work that you want to get hired to do. If you're at school, again, if you're a student and you're watching this, you've got 4 years of free time to do those assignments for the grade, but you've also got 4 years to try to figure out, like, what are you interested in and what kind of work do you want to produce? And right now you're in a 4-year environment where, you don't have to be part of the real world and you can kind of get a jump start on your style and on your technique so that when you leave school, you can say, yeah, I fucking did all this artwork, but none of that is my job. My job is all this time that I invested in myself to be awesome.
How are you feeling about time?
15 minutes. No, it's up to you. I mean, if you guys are bored, I don't want to, if anyone wants to bounce, you can bounce.
Definitely not.
People want to keep chatting. I mean, I got about all the time in the world.
So this was actually something that popped into my head earlier when we were talking about client work versus your own work. And it kind of touches on what you were just saying, which I think is excellent advice for any students that end up watching this. But so something that I've noticed, and I noticed this with friends' work as well, is you make these things, and then someone hires you to make that thing. But then when you go to make the thing for someone else, it's just like necessarily not as good as the one that you made for yourself. And you can throw all the man hours you want into it, but it's just not, it's not the same. Have you, in your adventures of, getting hired for this kind of work, found a way to like navigate that?
So I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic. There's always going to be compromise, so you have to understand that, like, you're working with a brand that has certain objectives. And so, I may make something that I feel like is a total home run and I hit it out of the park, and they'll want to do changes, like, oh, well, it needs to do this, or, it's strobing too much and we're worried about giving people seizures or something like that. So I think there's always going to be kind of a collaborative aspect with working with clients. And so I would hope that everything that I make for a client is going to be worse than my own personal work, because my own personal work, the only person that I have to appease is myself. And that's almost never the case with working with clients. And so I think you have to be comfortable with compromise. And so, I think there's like a real decision that you sort of need to make. Like, are you an artist or are you a designer? If you're an artist, then my God, don't ever do work for clients, because, they're traditionally peer reviewed by too many chefs in the kitchen. And, they're always going to dumb something down, unfortunately. And so if you do not want that to occur, then by all means, be an artist, look at crypto art and see if you can't sustain a living doing that. And then you never have to do client work. And this has been a conversation that me and G-Monk have had, quite a bit, which is he's super excited about crypto art because he doesn't want to do another goddamn car commercial. Because everything that's involved in doing a car commercial is they take, and if you've seen him speak, he'll show you this stuff that he's done for certain car commercials that they cut, that was fucking brilliant. That was amazing. And the client would always be like, oh, that's too weird, or it's too this. And it always get some sort of dumbed down to a level that they're comfortable with. So you have to remember, like, your idea of progressive is never going to be your client's idea of progressive. And so, these conversations that I've had with G-Monk is he's been like, oh, I love working in the crypto art space because I get to be me and I don't have to worry about having to do another car commercial where they're going to take all my great ideas and throw them out. So I would say that if you're not comfortable with that, then just be an artist. If you want to be a designer, then you have to be somewhat excited by the idea that it's going to be a collaboration. And, you're going to present ideas and they're going to give feedback. And you have to be willing to say, okay, cool, I'm going to take that feedback and still try to make it the best I possibly can, but making it, at their level of comfortability. And so, in the beginning, there's a lot of things that I did that was just like, I'll tell you, I used to try this where I would like make 4 things, 3 would be amazing, and the 4th one would be really bad, just so that I could eliminate it. But ultimately, they'd always pick the bad one. and then the 3 that were like really great, they would throw out, I just go, oh no, why did I do that? So I think I don't mind it. I don't mind because I treat it as a collaboration, that I'm working with a brand. Like, a perfect example is like Pepsi. Pepsi's been really good to me over the past couple of years, where I've worked on, they did, pre-pandemic, a lot of things in event spaces. And I was able to do things that I liked, but weren't like maybe crazy, crazy Josh like, but was still able to do things for a particular client. And I like the boundaries. I like, hey, we're Pepsi and it needs to be these colors. It needs to do this. It needs to do that. I like that stuff. And I've talked about this a lot. One of my favorite documentaries is a documentary called The 5 Obstructions by Lars von Trier. And that documentary is brilliant. I'm not a big fan of Lars von Trier. Some of his stuff I think is just way too over the top for me. But this documentary is really great, where he pings this guy named Jürgen Leff, who made a film in the 70s called The Perfect Human. And he challenges Jürgen Leff to remake the film 5 times. And each time he gives him a different obstruction that he has to adhere to. And for me, I'm petrified if you don't give me any obstructions. If you just say, oh, you can do whatever you want, well then shit, where do I start? So I like being the role of designer sometimes, because I know I'm collaborating with a brand. I know they have certain requirements. Like when I worked with Pepsi for the Super Bowl, we had to do stuff for Pharrell Williams. So I was designing a bunch of visuals for Pharrell. Well, you have to use this photo of Pharrell, and there has to be a 50 pixel buffer around Pharrell Williams where nothing can touch him. So you can make artwork, but there has to be like a 50 pixel aura where nothing touches Pharrell. Well, okay. Like, so by giving me rules, by giving me boundaries and obstructions, I now know what I can and can't do. So I kind of like don't mind working with brands. I don't mind that maybe it's not going to be, like the best thing ever. And, like that also becomes leverage, where in 1 year, I had to do visuals for Taylor Swift. I got paid a really great budget, but there was a huge committee, a lot of changes. What was made was still great, but the payday meant that I didn't have to work for a year. But that also meant that that same year, I could do a project for Square Pusher. The budget was $6,000. And because the budget was lower, everything was going to induce seizures. So usually when I'm working with a larger client and a larger budget, means that I can't take as many risks. But it means that I'm going to get paid so that I can take on the other things that don't pay that well, but I get to do kind of whatever I want. So it becomes kind of this interesting leverage where I'm going to do things where I'm collaborating with brands because I know there's going to be a lot of revisions, but the payday may sustain me for the next 6 months or a year, so that I can do other things where I'm 120%, Yeah, it's a great film. 5 Obstructions. If you haven't seen it, I think as like a creative person, it becomes a really interesting exercise in making work. I absolutely recommend that everybody watch that video, because it shows how you can be creative when you know what the restrictions are.
We got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
I was just going to say, Mimi had a quick question for you about developing a personal style and some of the struggles that she's had with that. Any tips?
Yeah. Yes. I have to be really careful about being on social media. because if I spend all my time looking at Tim's stuff, ultimately I'm going to become inspired by Tim's stuff. And I'm going to look at Tim's stuff and I'm going to be like, oh shit. Like, okay, let me see if I can do that. And then all of a sudden I'm making something that looks like Tim's stuff. And so in a lot of ways, my style is a replication of what Tim has already done. And so when it comes down to figuring out what your voice is, the less you look at, the better, because I think ultimately you end up getting influenced by the things that you look at. And so I think if you could sort of take those things away and don't look at social media a lot, you know, especially if you're trying to be creative. Like if you're sitting down and you're saying, okay, I want to make something, do not use the internet as a reference point, because you'll ultimately end up looking at other people's stuff and then you're just doing a version of that stuff that's already been done. So a lot of times I try to like remove all of that stuff as a factor. And if you don't look at other people's things that are in your industry, then I can look at other things. So sometimes that's music. Sometimes that's just going to a gallery and looking at paintings. Right now I'm rereading Dune. So I find other creative practices to be way more inspiring, because I can sit down and read Dune and I can sort of let my mind imagine things. And then I can say, okay, well, so I've imagined this thing that I read in Dune. Okay, so there's a fight and they've got this thing on their hip that they press that kind of creates like a force field around them. Well, what do I think that force field looks like? And so if you're looking at something else and then trying to interpret it in the tools that you're using, I think you get closer to figuring out a style. So that's the first point. The second point is that I want to make, and I actually did a talk on this, and if you, I'm sure some of you have seen it. It's my 99U talk, and it's called Escaping Success. So that whole talk was about that I had figured out a style and I just kept doing it over and over and over and over again, to the point where, like at the time I was drawing flowers. So I went on a trip to Tokyo and I bought these little books of all of the embroidery patterns that are found in kimonos. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna make artwork that's based on this like kimono thread work. So I was like making art, writing programs that was sort of generating kimonos, right? And I ended up doing that for so long that I kind of became that guy. And so I kind of wanted to move into a different thing. I wanted to do something else. And people were hiring me to do flowers. And so I wouldn't put too much emphasis on style, because ultimately in the end, I think if you do something for too long, I think you get pigeonholed as like only being that guy or gal that does that one thing. And so there was a period where I stopped doing sort of organic flowers, and, you know, I was going to like crystal shops and buying like, you know, pyramids, and I was trying to do like geometric stuff, or I was walking around town and taking pictures of architecture and like redrawing, you know, architecture to try to like figure out how to do something differently. So the style thing, I think, becomes really interesting. And I would even say Beeple is a really interesting guy to look at, because if you look at his everydays in the very beginning, he was just trying to draw better. His like first year of everydays literally is hand-drawn stuff. And then later he gets into Cinema 4D. And if you look at the 11 years that Mike has been making work, it has really evolved, and kind of the thing that he's really well known for now is not how he started in the beginning. So style for me kind of becomes like an interesting thing. I think if you eliminate a lot of outside noise, you'll find your style faster than like, oh shit, I'm spending all this time looking at Tim's work and now I'm a really good Tim clone. So by eliminating looking at social media and by looking at other, like, let me give you a perfect example, and Hugh will love this. You can go into fabric stores and you can say, hi, I'm making curtains and I need swatches because I'm going to make curtains. So you can walk into a fabric store, you can get cut a 4-inch by 4-inch swatch of fabric for free. They'll give it to you for free. And you could just like we have a garment district here in New York. So get away from the computer, go to a fabric store, find fabrics that you like, and cut the little swatches. Does that mean that you can't come back and see some kind of movement or some kind of structure that happened in a fabric swatch, and then you try to replicate it in the tools and technologies that you've adopted? Is a tremendous way to be inspired and try to figure out like what your style is, what you're drawn to. But I think if you're interested in like this thing, and then you're only viewing this thing, you'll end up being, you'll find it harder to actually get to your own style.
That's great. That's a great answer.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just to add to that a little bit,
Please.
just trying to think about how to frame this. So I agree with the part about looking at other people's work, specifically things that are like too closely related. Because yeah, I think that can be dangerous. It's like on one hand,
I have to unfollow Zach Lieberman. I can't look at Zach Lieberman. I can't look at Zach Lieberman because I look at Zach Lieberman, I'm like, fuck! Fuck, why didn't I do that? I should have done that. You got to be so careful.
Yeah.
I got to unfollow that guy because I just spent like, oh, gee, fuck. And then like a couple of things happen. Either you're going to replicate that person or you're not going to do something because it's already been done. You're going to be like, well, shit, why? Okay, well, I can't look at simplex noise anymore because this person spent a month exploring simplex noise and totally kicked ass at simplex noise. Now I'm not going to do it because it's already been done. And if you eliminate all that stuff and you don't look at it, then I'm more inclined to try something, even if it's already been done and I don't know about it, And Tim, I totally cut you off. I'm so sorry.
No, that's cool.
I had to yell fuck.
Passionate moment. So the only thing that I was going to say is like, I agree, but I think that there is some room, and this is a different thing than working towards a personal style, but something that I do often is like, as an exercise, I will, try to recreate something that I've seen, even if it is very close. But I think you have to go into that knowing that it's an exercise, trying to like dissect a thing and doing it from like a learning perspective rather than like, and probably crediting the person that you're
but isn't this but Tim, isn't this also like a total failure of the education system? Because the education system says, hey, you're in art school, hey, there's this guy Van Gogh, guess who we're going to paint like today? We're going to do our own Starry Nights. Like the whole education system is built this way, where you're taught for years to replicate shit that's already been done. And yes, I get it. Okay, cool. So we need to replicate this so that how this particular thing existed, how maybe the paint was made, how maybe the strokes were made. I totally get that. There's a great learning thing in there, but it also, I think, becomes a huge crutch because the whole education system doesn't teach people how to be themselves. It teaches them how to look at things that have already happened so that maybe on your own time, you'll figure out how to be you. And so, yeah, the education system, I think it's especially art school, man. I mean, I spent 4 years painting like dead people before me. Why? All right.
See, it's interesting because like Josh, you're like me. I know what you follow on Instagram because I follow the same stuff. Like, I don't look at digital artists mostly on Instagram. I look at death metal logo people because it's bananas. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm gonna make a logo, except I'm gonna make it look like trees.
Mm.
You know? I just
Yeah.
think I try not to follow too much digital art because otherwise, I mean, I've been offline for a while. But,
Listen, let's be honest. I follow Zach Lieberman, okay? but there's those times I just like, oh, okay, here's what he's posted. Oh God, it's great. It's like, you know. So I mean, I follow those guys, but it just you have to be aware that there are trappings, you know. I love Zach. I've worked with Zach. He's done some pieces at Zero Space. Of course, I follow him. But you just have to be aware that, like, hey, you know, you have to be wary of those trappings that, you know, I think just like Tim said, you know, there can be things that you can be inspired by that you can try to replicate so that you can figure out how to navigate certain things. But those should be just that, like sketches, exercises, because you'll just end up singing with somebody else's voice, and you don't want to do that. You'll run out of songs really quick.
I don't know if there's
Oh, sorry, I was just reading. What resources would you recommend to look into more about generative art theory and algorithms? I would say, as a starter, Dan Schiffman. He's got a really great series on YouTube called The Coding Train. And he did a really great book called The Nature of Code. And it's all about, you know, doing equations based on nature. So he's got like some exercises and flocking patterns and liquid simulations. And all that stuff is for free. So look at Dan Schiffman. He's got some great stuff. The Coding Train stuff, I think, is also really great. He tries to make everything like within 20 minutes. So most of the exercises that are on that YouTube channel are 20 minutes in length. So they're kind of like easily digestible things. I think that stuff is great to look at because you can sort of look at the structure of things and then try to figure out like, well, how do I take the structure, add my color, add my art to try to make it its own unique thing. That's what I kind of really like about Schiffman stuff, is it's kind of devoid of style and aesthetic. It's more really about the principles of here's how you write code to do, you know, this thing. And then you can take those exercises and apply them to your own personal stuff. So that's really the only thing I maybe mention. If you want to get into shaders, that GLSL, the Book of Shaders is a really great URL that kind of gives you some exercises for learning how to code shaders. So those are probably the two things that I would mention. But Schiffman and The Nature of Code. I know somebody put his URL, but there is a website for The Nature of Code. Would be a cool place to start. If you want to stick with processing, you might want to look at openprocessing.org, openprocessing.com. I'm not sure which one it is. Open Processing is a community-driven place where people can share sketches. It's very similar to Shader Toy, but for processing, whereas Shader Toy is for just GLSL. So those are maybe a couple places that I would check out. Obviously, Patreon I'm on Patreon. I'm doing some really fun things on Patreon. Dan Schiffman is on Patreon. He's also using that. It's also really a great way to support some of the content creators. Patreon for me has been really great because it allows people to ask questions. Like on my Patreon, some people said, I really want to know how to use MIDI. So we did a whole section on how to do stuff with MIDI. So you can find these kind of communities, like my Patreon in particular. People who are my patrons will ask questions like, hey, I want to know how to use MIDI, or I want to know how to use Connect, or I want to know how to use LiDAR. So, you know, we'll get into some of these topics based on these communities where, you know, Patreon, you know, it's got different tier levels, and you can subscribe to these things. You support the content creators, and you're also saying like, hey, I want to know, I think I only have like 125 patrons. So somebody can say, I want to know how to do this thing. You know, can you do a tutorial on it? And then that becomes, you know, content that, you know, that I'll put on my Patreon. So there are a lot of resources, and a lot of these links that have just been put in the chat, I think really answer that question.
I think we're working towards wrapping up here. So I think yeah, these resources are a good thing to you know, for like an ending note. Any sort of final thoughts from you on the topic? You know, like the business side of all this, having fun with your work, you know that?
Yeah, I think the fact that I want to end with the crypto thing, because it's such an exciting development right now for creators like us. I would say that should be like, you know, the next couple of days for you is really look at all the platforms that are available, look at what's happening in that space. And it's a way that you can start to build a community, get some finances around the work that you're creating. And I think we've talked a lot about the Instagram thing, you know, promote the type of work you want people to hire you to do. And we should just end there. I mean, those are the two holy grails for me right now.
Awesome. And so I think most people are familiar, but if anyone wants to catch up with you and the work that you're doing, where can they find you?
Instagram. Instagram.com/PrairieStation. It's where everybody talks to me. It's where I post the most. It's where I engage the most. You know, any other thing that I'm, you know, publishing, you know, if I put an animation on Instagram, I'm probably linking that there's a longer version on Vimeo. If I'm posting some kind of discussion that I'm talking about it on Twitter. Unfortunately, as much as I hate that it's a Facebook product, most of my time is Instagram. Just find me there, talk to me there. It's probably where I'm most active.
Awesome.
Thanks everybody. This was fun. Did everybody? I mean, I didn't get to. I was kind of hoping I was gonna hear some microphones and see some beautiful faces. Some of you people are so beautiful that you had to turn your camera off because we were immediately going to fall in love with you. I get it. Stuart, look at that. I'm instantly in love. I hope you guys had fun. Also, like, understand, I'm just usually sitting in this room by myself. So if you ever have a question on like how to make something or how to do something, I am totally approachable. I would love to chat. So if you send me a message, you want to know how to do something, that only makes me a better person because you're going to ask me something that maybe I kind of know how to do and we'll figure it out together. So please keep in touch. Yeah, somebody mentioned this a lot. You know, I stream on Twitch quite a bit. Twitch has been really fun in the sense that like I may stream like 8 hours a day. I'll just turn on Twitch and then just start making stuff. And that's been really fascinating because like people can see me work and then people will ask questions in the chat and we'll just like start writing the code like, hey, that's a really great question. Let me show you how to make it. Twitch has been really interesting. And so I think my Twitch is twitch.tv/ I think it's Joshua Davis. I'm trying to do it every day. So yeah, just look out for that. Follow me on Twitch and I'm sure it'll ping you, you know, when I'm on. Usually those videos will get saved. So if you're in a different time zone and you have to watch it later, it usually keeps the videos for a little bit. So yeah, I am spending some time on Twitch, just kind of like live streaming my day. That's been really fun as well. Yeah. That's me. All right, you guys, I gotta pee. I drink like all this
One of us had to
water,
say
and
it.
I'm like, I'm at a limit, people. I'm at my limit. But
Thanks, Josh.
Tim and Darren, thank you so much for inviting me and organizing this. I hope everyone is doing well in COVID. Let's keep in touch. We're an awesome community of people, and let's keep kicking ass.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Josh, and everyone else. This is great, and I hope to see everyone back here.